Welcome back, folks. If that introduction doesn't feel appropriate, you probably didn't watch part 1 first. So go do that, and I'll still be here when you get back. I feel much better, so I got nothing but time. Go ahead. It's like 20 minutes long. I'm timing you. Okay, that's enough time for them to pause and click the link. Let's just jump back into it, because you're here for the games, not my distractingly debonair face. I don't actually know what debonair means. Ugly, right? Let's go with that. On my last list of awesome GBA games, I included the Mortal Kombat ports because they did a suitable job scaling down the GameCube game to a less powerful device. And Tekken Advance can be praised for very similar reasons, except it also stands tall as the first Tekken game for Nintendo systems. And as far as first attempts go, it nails it. And the amount of depth they managed to pack into this portable cartridge was just as impressive when I was recording it as it was when I first got this game as a kid, when I didn't even know what the Tekken series was, but thought the Tiger guy was cool. And to be fair, he freaking still is. The combat boils down to one-button punch and one-button kick, mixed with crouching and jumping, as well as grabs, and most of the special maneuvers have had their inputs simplified to match the fewer amount of buttons. But it's still possible to string together an impressive combo, and each character also has an extra powerful attack they can charge that is almost always a one-hit KO if timed correctly. Combine that with a pretty robust roster and fully 3D graphics, and it's a wonder this game didn't get more publicity, especially with how few fighting games were in the system during its lifecycle. Guess everyone was too busy with Street Fighter. Stupid Street Fighter was taking the attention away from better franchises. Yeah, I said it. Zangief is dumb too. You want to fight about it? Let's settle it in Smash.
Settle it in Smash!
What are you wearing?
Little back!
Settle it in Smash with Super Smash Brothers.
There were a lot of RPGs on the GBA. From re-releases of basically every Final Fantasy game, to originals like Golden Sun, and even some weird ones like Mario and Luigi. Lunar Legend is one that went under the radar, though, because the title is kind of generic and it didn't have a large following to support it in the sea of other heavy hitters on the system. It was actually an adjusted retelling of a Sega CD game called Lunar the Silver Star. This game was remade multiple times, including on the PS1 and PSP, so you might have played it in some form and not realized it. But I only tried the GBA version because it came out in a time when I was hard up for an immersive RPG to get into, while I had a lot of free time to waste during weekends at my dad's house. And this game really hit the spot as a kid. The gameplay was nothing terribly special, a pretty standard RPG for the time with large maps full of treasure and occasional hidden paths to get even better treasure, and very regular random battles. The battles played out pretty standard as well, though with a very large 5-person max party, some really smooth animations, and the ability to auto-battle, which was still pretty rare in that era. Aside from that, it's a basic attack and skill-focused turn-based combat system, with a special bar that fills up the more damage you do, allowing a more powerful character-specific attack when the bar is full. Battle aside though, the characters have really good personality and are well written, and while it doesn't include the voice acting or animated cutscenes that the other remade versions have, it still has a very nice art style, and some more cinematic sections where the perspective changes and uses more detailed sprites, which still sets it apart from the usual static conversation screens of other RPGs on the system. In general, as far as portable RPGs go, you could do a lot worse than this game, and to this day I still have some very fond memories of playing it for hours on end. Plus, the story revolves around finding various dragons, and I friggin' love dragons. End of story, moving on. Who doesn't miss Banjo Kazooie, eh? Except that one jerk over there shaking his head. Yeah, I see you. You're wrong. Banjo Kazooie was the best, and no, ukulele doesn't make it better, so stop using that defense. Sorry, got kinda carried away there. This is another game that fans probably know existed. After all, it is listed on the Wikipedia page with Nuts and Bolts and Banjo Pilot as side games, but this is easily the best one of those. Not that it's amazing competition, but hey, at least this feels like a Banjo game, just in top-down, bite-sized form. The plot conveniently sits between the first and second main games, where Gruntilda's ghost is put into a robot body so they don't have to work around the fact that she's still under a rock at the beginning of the second game, and she kidnaps Kazooie and goes back in time to prevent her from ever meeting Banjo. Which is one way to do it, I guess. Luckily, Kazooie isn't out of commission for long, and honestly Banjo isn't that bad to control on his own anyway, so splitting them up briefly doesn't really have any major negative impact on the game. Everything about the console entries is still here though, collecting a ridiculous amount of things, talking to a senile mole to get new abilities, fighting bosses with repetitive tactics, transforming into creatures to get into new areas, all that jazz. They even find ways to mix up the traditional gameplay with fun minigames to get some of the jiggies, which can sometimes even change the player perspective and take advantage of character abilities in unique ways. The more simplistic graphic style combined with the isometric view doesn't always do the platform sections any favors because depth can be kind of hard to judge, and collision detection isn't perfect, which leads to taking more hits than is sometimes fair. But there's also a ridiculous amount of health honeycomb around the levels at any given time, and considering this game still feels like its console counterparts, I have to rank it towards the top because it's a rare example of a quality portable sequel to a well-loved console series. Oh, Bomberman, how the mighty have fallen. Which is even more reason to hold the best classics close to your heart. This is easily the second best game in the entire series, behind the absolutely fantastic and also underrated Bomberman Hero on the N64. Coincidentally, it also plays somewhat similar to that game, though without the 3D graphics or ability to jump. It plays more like an adventure version of the traditional Bomberman games, with a dash of Pokemon thrown in because it's the GBA and every game wanted to capture the success of Pokemon. Basically, instead of just progressing around a grid, it's actually a large world with various puzzles and an upgrade system that opens up new areas. This includes a modification mechanic for Bomberman's bombs, giving them new abilities, and various small creatures Bomberman acquires and can switch between on the fly, which let him use each of their unique powers. Which is where the Pokemon mechanic comes in. While nowhere near as complex, these animal friends can be powered up through field pickups, and then used to battle various NPCs to receive items and tools used to upgrade bombs. These battles essentially play out in a rock, paper, scissors fashion, and at the end of 3 rounds, the monster with the most HP left wins. It's not amazing, but it adds depth to the game and is optional in most cases, so it doesn't really detract from the rest of the game. I personally just love this game because I think Bomberman is at his best in these more platforming-focused games like this and Bomberman Hero, rather than just the traditional battle mode only games, which, to its credit, this game does have the battle mode also. It's just not the sole focus like most other Bomberman games. And, before someone yells at me in the comments, I know most Bomberman games have a single-player campaign also, but they're kinda just the battle mode with a generic story tacked on. That's right, suck it haters, I love the Super Monkey Ball series. I was very proud of that fact during its heyday in the GameCube era, and even now that the series kinda rolled itself off course, so to speak, I look back on those amazing classics fondly, this portable entry included. It admittedly includes a smaller, less complex selection of stages, and there's less focus on the awesome mini-games since multiplayer is harder on the system, but the core gameplay is intact and as good as ever, even with a 4-directional control scheme. This is also another game that just looked stunning back in the day, and still holds up today with its fully 3D levels thanks to similar technology that made Star Fox possible on SNES. And since you're not directly controlling a character in a 3D space, and more so just tilting the stage itself, quick taps of the 4-directional buttons is more than sufficient to get through most of the stages. Though some of the collision detection for the stage hazards can be faulty because of how their 3D textured sprites map to an actual 3D plane, but for the most part, everything you loved about classic Super Monkey Ball, before it got bogged down by tilt controls and other dumb gimmicks, is intact and available on the go. And man did it feel good to get my Monkey Ball on again. Probably could have phrased that better. Oh well, no time, we've got more games to cover. Funny enough, this is actually the game that inspired this list. Storytime. I was watching my friend VG Dad stream Sonic Adventure, and we were talking about how terrible it is, and somehow it got on the topic of better, but lesser-known Sonic games that he could have been playing instead. And I brought up this game, which he and his chat had never heard of, and I was like, I wonder what other awesome GBA games from my youth would be fun to dredge back up. And then I just kept finding more. I actually had to cut it down in order to just have 2 videos. But, long story short, this game is fantastic and I feel like literally no one played it. And I'm not even a Sonic fan. The only other one I really like that isn't a racing game is Sonic 3D Blast, if that gives you any indication of how pure I like my Sonic games. But, I digress. I've gone way too long without actually talking about the game itself. This is another pseudo 3D isometric game, but this time it's an arena brawler featuring all your favorite Sonic characters, like Knuckles, Tails, Shadow, and those other ones, the dumb ones that came later. But it's fine. In this game, you pick your character and then choose their attack patterns, which aren't entirely clear because they all have the same shot, aerial, and guard options, but they do different things depending on which order you select each one, and when used in combat, each character has a regular melee combo, an aerial smash attack that hits people on the ground, and a ground special attack. You can try various combinations until you find what works best. Unfortunately, it's mostly trial and error, and then just remembering the order you picked them. Hey, no game is perfect. There's also a recharge function to the guard, where if you hold it, you can fill your health bar back up until someone attacks you, which is very handy during the time when your opponents have just died and you want a quick power boost. And while every character chooses combinations of the same 3 icons for their attacks, every character has vastly different attacks on the field. Sonic mostly uses his weird ball form to bounce around, whereas Tails relies mostly on gadgets to fight for him, and Shadow uses his epic, brooding powers. The levels are all varied as well, and the combat is quick and fluid once you figure out which attack you selected does, making for a fun and crazy free-for-all against all your favorite Sega mascots, and also those other ones, I guess. There's also some added variety in the form of a story mode, though it's admittedly not amazing, which unlocks a few hidden fighters, as well as multiplayer-only minigames, which I unfortunately wasn't able to try, for obvious reasons. In case you couldn't tell by now, I actually really enjoy this game, and I'd honestly forgotten how much I enjoyed it until I started playing it again for this video. It might be the one I got the most footage for, and this list includes multiple RPGs. So why is it not number 1 then? Well, like I said earlier, there are a lot of amazing GBA games no one played. Okay, so this might seem like kind of a cop-out choice for the number 1 slot, and you might be saying to yourself, but Zero, this is just a sequel to Season of Ice, which actually sold really well and a lot of people played because it was like one of the first games released on the GBA. I can't believe I got through 2 of your dumb videos just to get to this game. I'm gonna unsubscribe and crap on your lawn. But okay, first of all, ouch, words hurt. Second of all, I live in a duplex, so my lawn is shared, and I don't like my neighbors, so do your worst. And third of all, well, I mean, you're not wrong. Season of Ice was a surprisingly popular game, and actually the only one of the series on the GBA that I physically owned as a kid. But when I later discovered the sequel, and then played the other, 4 Spyro games that came out for the GBA, it was easy to see that this was the best one of them all. And I'm assuming that a lot of people played Season of Ice thinking it was going to be just like the PS1 games, and came away sorely disappointed and never got to the sequel. But literally everything about the second entry is better, and it's more than worth the top spot on this list. For starters, Spyro has all new powers thanks to the story of this game basically locking away his fire breath, so in this one the goal is to use his new ice breath to freeze the collectible fireflies that will help to reheat the Dragon Realm. And along the way, not only does Spyro regain his fire breath, but also eventually collects electric breath as well, which all give him different abilities. For example, ice breath can be used to freeze sections of water that he can cross, or freeze enemy solids so he can charge into them safely. But fire breath can burn certain obstacles and light torches, and electric breath can recharge generators. Aside from just a more diverse moveset for the dragon himself, he also brings along a few playable friends for the first time, such as Sheila the Kangaroo, who has levels that are more like grid-based puzzles, and Agent 9 the Monkey, who explores side-scrolling levels with his trusty blaster. These mix up the traditional gameplay and help break up the monotony of running around collecting gems and fireflies. While the game still has some tricky controls due to a slanted isometric view and a 4-directional controller making some jumps tricky, especially as Sheila, the levels are all varied and provide different tasks for Spyro and his friends to undertake. And there's even a map that uncovers as you explore it to prevent from getting lost, even if you might still lose track of where the last few gems or collectibles are in a stage. In a lot of ways, this game could have easily failed. Season of Ice was already not a perfect adaptation of the Spyro formula to the small screen, and essentially every sequel that came after this was terrible, especially after the soft reboot with A New Beginning where it switched to a dumb side-scrolling view and ruined the entire series. It's really kind of a miracle that the second entry hit the sweet spot, at least as far as the portable entries are concerned. The main reason it deserves the #1 spot, though, is because of the drastic drop-off to the player base after the first portable title. It truly encompasses the meaning of the best GBA game that no one played. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go back to playing Spyro, because all this talk has gotten me itching for some dragon action. Remember, I do love me some dragons. So, until next time, have fun.
American Skateland was the DS version of American Wasteland on console, which was just okay in the oversaturated landscape of yearly Tony Hawk releases by the time it came out, but Skateland was notable for being the first Tony Hawk game on the new dual-screen system, and arguably a better game than its console counterpart. It also had a pretty sweet pun in the title. It introduced unique concepts such as creating your own graffiti, skateboard, and other customizations, and uploading them to others via the fledgling Nintendo Wi-Fi connection.